Well, hello everyone. I'm Julia Kane. I'm the chair of training at SAFPAC. I'm very pleased actually to be here today, having spent 3 years in total lockdown for various reasons, and this year just beginning to go back to face-to-face work. I'm just really interested to hear what other people's experiences are and also what people are thinking. I've had some quite stunning experiences having gone back to face-to-face work, which has really got me questioning technology, I have to say. So I am biased, by the way. So anyway, enough of that. I'd first like to introduce Patricia Talens. The title of her talk is The Shaping Force of Technology in Psychotherapy. So Trish, over to you.
Okay, good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me, Del and Julia. Lovely to see so many friendly faces and familiar faces. So I wanted to start by saying a little about where I'm coming from and what I'm trying to explore in today's talk. The talk is part of a larger piece of research currently being carried out, which explores how therapeutic practitioners experience and interact with highly manualized and less manualized environments. The relevance for today is that I want to begin by exploring practices and theories before artificial intelligence. I want to look at how we at times begin to operate in mechanical and technological ways, and to consider how the power of AI can potentially speed up this process and engulf us further into a technological mindset if we don't understand our relation to it. The section of research I want to introduce for the conference is a theoretical component that explores some implications and questions about manualized practice when we view it as a technology. So very often in psychotherapy, we are looking at technology as an instrumental component rather than exploring a more anthropological sense of technology, the human aspect of technology, which is less about objects such as laptops and phones, which might get a little more coverage, and more about how our use of manualized interventions as instruments might say something more about us. The hope is that by taking this angle, we open up a wider conversation regarding the development, the usage, and the ethical implications of manualized practice for all its users. Introducing some concepts and ideas from the philosophy of technology, post-phenomenology, and existential thought helps us to consider how manualized approaches and systematizing elements of technological thinking can mold and shape practice inside and outside of the therapy room. What I'm not trying to do today is put down manualized practices at all. They're very helpful to many, and with everything, I think there's a time and a place for these things. However, I do think that the way that we interact with these practices does need examination and additional ethical considerations. So I just want to offer some very simple clarifications on what I mean by techniques, frameworks, and manualized intervention. I've just put them up on the screen for you, but essentially the key difference I want to highlight today is the contrast between a pre-established and pre-designed take-up of space and a therapeutic space that is unknown and yet to become or emerge in the moment. The definitions are offered up here, firstly to clarify what's being discussed today, but also to show that there can be quick transitions between these three simple categories. What may start as a technique or framework can in fact start to look more like a manualized practice when it moves into a pre-established and calculated formula. So how are manualized interventions viewed as a technology? Well, defining technology as the application of scientific knowledge for practical purposes, especially in industry, helps us connect how some therapeutic approaches could be considered a form of technology, one in which the therapist responds in some way to knowledge which has been acquired predominantly through research and training, rather than practice and experience, bringing to light the divide between subjective experiences encountered and the objective interpretations derived from science. So why is this important? Well, I want to start by introducing some Heideggerian concepts, which Del was talking about earlier, which help us move beyond the therapy room. As I mentioned before, there is an attempt in Heidegger's work to explore beyond our usual conception of technology as a means to an end, which he calls the instrumental, and to consider a more anthropological view of technology as a human activity. To solely view technology as instrumental risks a form of concealing, and so we need to look to the essence of technology and not just to the things themselves. In the case of manualized practice, it becomes less about a specific technique as an instrument of change, and more a question of what is revealed about us through the way we frame the therapeutic encounter. So for this, I want to introduce the concept of inframing as an active shaping force in which we impose our frameworks onto nature and the world around us. In particular, he looks at modern technology as a cyclical process that increasingly engulfs and systematizes our way of being, warning that the tide of technological revolution in the atomic age could so captivate, bewitch, dazzle, and beguile man that calculative thinking may someday come to be accepted as the only way of thinking. It is the calculative nature of manualized practice which makes it akin to a technology. The automation of systems and repeatable formats in practices such as CBT are highlighted as an example. However, any practice that becomes dogmatic, calculable, and articulated through a set of instructions may also have some similar implications. In therapy, I find Buber's concept of I, thou, and it helpful in understanding how framing can lend itself to different encounters with the other. The I, thou speaks of an embrace and engagement with otherness in such a way that we meet it in all its uniqueness, not the perceived or known, but in what emerges in the moment. Contrary to this, the I-it expresses a relationship in which the other is categorized and imposed upon by one's own framework. But Heidegger's idea goes beyond the one-to-one encounter, as we are encouraged to consider the powerful ability technology has in shaping the environment around us and how this environment shapes us, in this case, the therapists, into a mode of technological thinking as a given truth, the result of which is that cyclical process which can propel us further and further from our own sense of being. To explain this further, he introduces the concept of techne, a craftsmanship alongside modern technology. The purpose of which is to show, in essence, how these two forms of technology are not only different, but that they lend themselves to very different ways of being or engaging with the world. Within this, techne belongs to bringing forth to poesis. It is something poetic, a sense of emerging from and in relation with, encountered in such a way that the outcome cannot be known beforehand. Contrary to this, in the case of modern technology, we are faced with the challenging forth, in which we set upon our environment. We implement a form of ordering as a way to take control of the productive process. Within this, psychotherapy can use the tools and techniques offered as a superficial technology, but must become aware that the way we view the world is affected by how we conceptualize and approach what we are experiencing. In essence, if the tools are a mere means to an end for a metric outcome and we don't pay attention, we risk a danger not posed by the superficial technology itself, but of increasingly denying the ability to feel oneself in an original way which is fluid and able to reconstitute meaning for itself. Our attempt to control and master the world in order that we can extract from it shifts us from being part of a process to controlling the process. In this sense, challenging forth is a way of driving toward maximum yield at the least expense to unlock and transform what is produced. At a point, we begin to store what we've extracted, a term he calls standing reserve. Within this, we find it hard to see a problem as technology in its instrumental form is working for us and we're able to produce all that we want. But here lies the danger, as technological thinking begins to work against us, trapping us and engulfing us in its growing process. In this sense, we too become a form of standing reserve, with expectations to produce and yield maximum results. We become a constituted part of a bigger process, and as such, it becomes increasingly difficult to step out of it. So let's consider a really simple, straightforward example in a system such as IAP, which I think is now NHS Talking Therapies. What begins as a self-monitoring form for a client represents in some way a score for the therapist as the numbers become data to measure success. This demonstrates a case for funding from a local authority, which feeds into a larger policy within the medical model and diagnostic model, all increasingly held together by a culture of auditing and accountability that constantly privileges numbers for evidence. The entrenched relationships are increasingly difficult to transform or change due to dependency on larger political and economic models. It gathers together and engulfs all aspects of the process, including the craftsman, into a way of being, shaping the worldview and order, all in the name of science. So why do I highlight this take-up of application? Well, I think Max Weber's take on science is really helpful in thinking about manualized practice and how these frameworks serve to break down societies into component parts rather than seeing them as a whole, making everything as efficient as possible and offering a more detailed examination of each constituted part. However, there is a cost for such a society, and that is to the individual. Through the increase of a rationalized and systematized bureaucratic industry, Individuals soon feel the effects of living in a mechanical and efficient way that entangles and binds them ever closer to the system that supports their way of being. The systematizing nature of rationality eventually no longer allows space for deferring experiences, but instead asks that we start to treat people in a systematized way. With this in mind, I can't help but wonder how many therapists would feel confident to say no to handing out a self-monitoring form if asked to by their organization or their theory, and the repercussions for them if they won't do it. So this, for me, really highlights a tension between putting the other first and putting the evidence first. So bringing it back to the therapy room, in the case of psychotherapy, we might consider the implications of increasingly using a diagnostic model that categorizes and labels constituted parts within a person in order that we yield maximum results. Through this, we risk creating a detached language that no longer encompasses authentic emergent experience, but instead sets upon it an external description. It sets us up to establish arbitrary ethical rules of good and bad, which are pre-established and no longer require our engagement. This, for Hannah Arendt, is a fundamental concern as we no longer take up the realm of the political. Instead, we think about the world rather than address how we act within it. And for me, this opens
so my
up...
train altogether is £29. Does that sound reasonable?
Daniel, it sounds not too expensive.
Don't do it, Daniel.
Yeah, but it's...
Can you turn your mic off? Sorry, Trish.
No, it's okay. There isn't a nicer voice I'd like to hear. So this, for Hannah Arendt, is a fundamental concern. So we no longer take up the realm of the political. Instead, we think about the world rather than address how we act within it. So for me, this opens up implications towards what we can obtain from thinking about a moment, as opposed to what we can obtain from being in action in the moment. And I think writers such as Kierkegaard really help us to see that there are different ways of knowing, one in which is acquiring of knowledge and one which is yet to be discovered within ourselves through action. For Kierkegaard, this distinction sits in two realms: knowledge as a possibility and the ethical, when he says abstract through thought requires him to become disinterested in order to acquire knowledge. The ethical demand is that he become infinitely interested in existing. What comes to light is the tensions held in psychotherapy to not only think about our actions, but also to be in action at any given moment. The idea that we can hold the tension of being both, I think, is something that de Beauvoir speaks of when she's encouraging us to take up this engagement and accept the task of ambiguity in each given moment as part of our being and ethical approach, letting us know that engagement is complex, it's messy, it's difficult, but at times the alternative is just not going to be any good for us. That we're better off with the messiness, really. So in this sense, therapists might find themselves caught up with external issues and expectations of targets, risks, and outcomes, rather than engaging with what's emerging in the therapeutic space. When we step into the realm of technology and systems, as we've explored, I think it could become increasingly difficult for the therapist to hold on to that tension and to hold on to that therapeutic space. So what do we do with all of this? Well, part of Heidegger's argument is that you cannot use technology to escape technology. Instead, we need to understand our relationship to it. So when we consider manualized practice, we need to consider how this technology mediates. Oh, I think I've skipped a page.
Well, I've just got a minute, really, Trish. Just
all right. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Our relationship to it. Oh, I think. Okay. We seem to have skipped. Okay, well, I'll skip through this. No. Apologies, there it is. So here's where we come to post-phenomenological framework of mediation. We explore how technologies are a form of media that offer channels between humans and the world around them. When technologies are in use, they shape and mediate interactions between the user and the world. Technology co-creates our experience and constitutes our reality. When I say this, I mean it shapes our intention and intentionality. So we look at what is driven. So we look at what is driven by the method and technology rather than our own experience. You only need to look at algorithms or social media to see that concepts can easily be propelled and shaped when directed. The idea of technology being separate as an object or construction and individuals as subjects becomes problematic in post-phenomenology. This is because technology shapes the way people see the world and affects how we experience and organize our existence. Therefore, technologies carry with them a form of morality, whether intentionally or not, and morality is central to the therapeutic endeavor. I'm literally on the concluding part. It won't be a second. So when we consider manualized practice, we need to consider how we interact with it and what it means to us, as well as how we see things. So just to finish off, we're left with the concept that technologies such as standardized techniques do not solely work as arbitrary tools, but fulfill our agenda and actually help towards constituting the interaction. We're encouraged not to solely ask what technology or technique can do, but also how it might influence our being in the room and acknowledge how our interactions have been mediated. To fully understand human relations with technology, we need to firstly see that technologies are in fact not part of the world as an operant, but part of our relations with the world. They shape all kinds of relations, and in doing so, they influence practices and the ways in which we see things. And so I'll finish off just by saying that I don't think it's techniques that are problematic, but more our difficulty and lack of resistance to hold space and let the relationship be unknowable and to experience it in all its uniqueness. So with that, I just want to leave you with one final quote from Rogers, and that is just to say that people are just as wonderful as sunsets if you let them be. In fact, perhaps the reason we could truly appreciate a sunset is that we cannot control it. When I look at a sunset, as I did the other evening, I don't find myself saying, soften the orange a bit on the right-hand corner. I don't try to control a sunset. I watch it with awe as it unfolds. Sorry for having to speed it up there for you right at the last minute, but thank you for listening. Any questions or feedback, or maybe some of your experiences?
We've just
Trish,
got a couple of minutes for questions. Sorry.
Well, Trish, what was the book that you quoted Heidegger from at the beginning?
Oh, sorry.
Do you know? Don't need to know now. Maybe you could just.
Which book?
Yeah.
Oh, it's a mix of different books, but
Okay.
but there's it's actually his paper on technology.
All right.
Do you want me to send it to you?
Please, yes. Thank you. Or maybe anybody else.
Let me put you on a full screen so I can see who's. Oh, hi, Richard. Is it you?
Yeah, it's me.
Yeah, it's a question concerning technology. It's actually one of his essays that he wrote, and in that he talks about modern technology with older technology. But the two were viewed very differently.
Well, I'm still stuck in the 20s reading him, but when I make my way through the decades, I'll tackle that. If you could let me know what it is at some point.
It's a really nice paper. It's quite short.
Cool.
So, Trish, what hope is there? I mean, do you think that? I mean, it's so difficult when we're in it to see where we are. So, but once you're in it, is it a sunset on? Is it, what Heidegger says? What's happening? Isn't it even more? Are we beyond sunset time for the human condition?
Funnily enough, I did skip a little paragraph or two there. Tried to style it out. I don't know if you noticed, but I skipped a little paragraph or two there just because we were running out of time. But actually, one of the paragraphs talks about artificial intelligence might actually be quite useful for us in the sense that it shows us therapeutic technology versus therapeutic space. So it's not that either one is right or wrong, but actually maybe we do need a bit more understanding of, well, that's more for therapeutic technology. And that's more of a therapeutic space, and to just acknowledge that these two things might and are quite different, and that they kind of lend themselves to very different relationships. So artificial intelligence might, just because it brings in the instrumentality aspect, and when we see it as an instrument, we can appreciate it more as a technology. So it might funnily be a bit more helpful in that sense. But yeah, I think things like this are helpful.
Perhaps the difficulty is it's difficult enough understanding human being, and but the danger of extracting being from our work, and by that I mean human being, and replacing it with technological being. We certainly don't understand what AI as being might be, do we?
Yeah.
I just I found myself feeling a bit more extreme than you, frankly. Oh, sorry, frankly, Trish. That technology might end up replacing our very being. Scares me, I have to say.
I mean, the people I really feel sorry for are the CBT practitioners. I'll be honest, I'm not too frightened about the human, contact disappearing, but I'm worried about their jobs. I think because it is so repeatable, and I actually think the reason I don't go so strongly against it is that, I know so many practitioners that work in CBT that really want to lend themselves more to this style of psychotherapy, the therapeutic space, and they just can't get out of it, and the systems don't allow them, and the organizations don't allow them, and the evidence doesn't allow them. And so I just find those kind of things really need a lot more consideration, and we need to think about what we do to therapists when we impose those frameworks and systems on them. I don't think it's very healthy for them at all, really.
No,